Okay, so welcome. We do these webinars. Let's see, I got my sound right. Once a month, and we're excited to kind of share this month's topic. It's something that all of us at different times will need to make a plan, and we're going to we're going to swing wide and explain the whole process, but hopefully it'll be relevant enough for a local recruiter if they have to come up with their own plan that the information will still be very relevant for them. So please feel free to use the chat box if you have questions. Melissa, can you see my screen good, or is there little black boxes from?
No, it's good. I'll let you know.
Perfect. Sometimes when I try to see the chat box, it gives me this weird little thing. So let's go ahead and get started. So the purpose of this training, the slides that are available to everybody. And the purpose is to really kind of walk you through what it looks like to make a strategic plan for your state or for your region or for your local area. And this is adaptable. And then we've made the slides so that if you want to come back to this later on, you can kind of go through and read the slides and remember what you're supposed to do. And so these slides were helped put together by, I want to shout out to our technical support team. With IDRC, we have a couple groups that kind of guide the work that we do. And this was looked at and developed by some of those members from different states and then we kind of put the process together. So we're going to kind of today, what we're going to look at is why we need IDR plans, the steps that really need to be in that plan, that you need to be able to develop that plan. We're going to look about how to evaluate. Sometimes we're making a plan without really looking at how we're doing. So how do you evaluate how current things are going? How do you make the right goals? How do you determine whether you need partnerships or, how to work with different groups in the community and kind of how to put it all together and the timing of those things. So state IDR plans are required to ensure, like it says here, and demonstrate alignment between the laws, regulations, and guidance, and the development of implementation of an effective balanced state identification recruitment plan. So in real words, basically that means we have a lot of different regulations, a lot of things that we're supposed to be doing, and you're wanting to look at all of those and figure out how you can make a plan to meet those and find all of the possible eligible kiddos in your state. So this is something that I feel like some people know. Some of you guys that have been here a long time are aware of this, but I'm going to go ahead and drop this, share this tool that's available for states and for everybody.
I already put it in there.
Perfect. Melissa just dropped in the chat box so you guys can see it. So there is a really good manual developed by OME that has, I don't know who developed it, but it's available through the results page. And there's a ton of information for recruiters. And there's a section. Sometimes we get people say, where exactly does it say we need to do IDR plans or have action plans? It references in the recruiter manual, and you can see it here, where it has this whole section on developing action plans and state and local IDR plans. And so they have some really good information here of the things that you should have. And the training that we're going to provide today kind of will hit on how to use those different things. But an example of an action plan or an IDR plan says that this plan should give direction for your recruiters across the state. It should include your objectives, your strategies, your staff assignments, the timelines, all of these things. And so they give you some pretty good information on how to do that right there. But we're going to go into it so that it makes more sense. So to start out with, I'm just going to act like some of you are brand new and you're not really even sure what this is supposed to look like. And then hopefully we'll give you in-depth information enough that those of you that are seasoned that want to go back and check your plans, you'll be able to have some ideas of extra things that you can add in there. So your plan really should explain the purpose of the plan. You should explain the objectives that you want to have happen. Like one of the objectives that everyone should have is that in their area or in their region or in their state, they're thoroughly canvassing and working with all different areas to really find all of the students. You want to make sure that you're outlining the activities and strategies to be able to meet those objectives. You're going to want to mention what kind of resources are available to do that, who's responsible to do different things, what's the timeline of these things, and what are those plans to be able to make sure these things can happen. So the plan should include, by month, the activities and strategies for professional development, for recruitment plans, for quality control plans, for any coordination. And so before you get overwhelmed and think, I'm not really sure how to do this, I hope that through this, we're going to be able to kind of swing wide of the things, and then we'll give you some examples of kind of some detailed ways to do this. So I believe the most important thing, and this is just my 2 cents, that when you're making a plan, you got to know what you're good at. You've got to know what's already going well, and you've got to realistically look at what's not going well. I worked for a long time in the state of Tennessee, and we were super underfunded with funding. And there were areas in the state that I knew that we were not fully covering because maybe they were too far away, and it would take a lot of resources to get out there where other places were easier to get to. So whenever I was making a plan, I knew that we needed to do more to be able to cover those areas because it was definitely a weakness. It was definitely something that we were not covering as well as we know what you do well, but you also very much have to look at what your, what are your weaknesses areas. So you want to understand and assess the current state of what's happening. And this, I believe, is just as important. You don't want to just make a plan without really understanding what your strengths and what your challenges are. And so you want to clearly identify those challenge areas. So we find when we work in states, for example, there's a state that I can think of that the recruiter said, I'm never going to housing. I just don't like it. I'm not going to go. Well, we could definitely say, well, then you're for sure missing kids, because if you can't find them at work, you're not getting the information at school, they're going to be home. And if you're not going to the house, then that's a whole section of people that you're missing. So for that particular state, the recruiter felt really uncomfortable going to housing. So what that person needed was more training on how to do that. Or maybe there were certain places that she really didn't want to go to, but later on, as she accompanied somebody else and saw how they did, that she was able to kind of expand her ability to do that. So you want to determine what areas of your state have not had thorough IDNR efforts conducted, and really look at in the last 6-8 months what that's looked like. So you also want to assess what's going well. So you probably have some recruiters that are rock stars in certain areas, and you want to think, okay, I want to know what everyone's strengths are, so that if someone's weakness is another person's strength, you can pair them together and figure out how to get better support for each other. So we believe in balanced recruitment. I know we talk about this all the time. We believe that there are 4 areas of recruitment that you have to do. One is working with schools. Another one is housing. Another one is working with the businesses like agriculture or fishing businesses. And the other one is working in the community. It's community locations and community partnerships. If you don't do any of all 4 of those, then you're missing a section of people that you could be possibly finding. So part of what you're doing in that assessment is saying, are we really getting out to housing? What is our school recruitment? For some of you, school recruitment, you have got that down. For others of you, you're not able to get into the school, and you're not getting those surveys or ways to be able to find new students. For many migrant ed programs, we're not leveraging the community partnerships that we could. We could be working with other groups that are already coming across farm worker populations, but it takes time to make sure that we're able to share information and build those partnerships. A lot of us are not comfortable with farms and agribusiness, or we're not sure how to approach them. So all of those things you're really trying to figure out. If you're not sure, maybe you're brand new. Let's say you're a brand new coordinator. One of the things you want to do is check out if there are any logs or reports of what's been done in the past. You want to look at kind of maps of where farm stuff is and see if any of it's been visited. So you really want to just do that assessment before you do your plan to see how things are going. So as you're reviewing those logs and the COE reports and mapping out the areas where things have been conducted, we just worked with a state this summer. One of our member states wanted to work in a particular area that they hadn't been. And so they wound up coordinating with their recruiters to all go work in this particular area where they knew that they hadn't had as much staff as they needed. And they were able to find kids because they knew that was a hole, that was an area. And that was part of their plan for the year, is to cover for those different areas by doing different types of efforts that would make sure that happened. So you're assessing, you're comparing the numbers of families and youth in different areas. We used to do a report where we would look at our numbers by county from year to year to year, and maybe it'd be 2021 numbers, 2022, 23, and we would see what the influx, if the numbers were going up and down. And then if I was over that area, I would want to know in my mind whether the numbers made sense. Did we just have a big, huge drop because maybe we didn't have a recruiter in the area, somebody had left? Or did we have a big drop and I really couldn't explain it? We didn't know why. You want to look at housing locations, for example. You can keep lists of all the places you've ever had migrant families, signed up in the program, and check and see how long has it been since we've gone to this particular area and kind of canvas housing. You want to look at those qualifying activities to make sure that you're still working with those industries. I've seen, for example, tobacco in Tennessee, I have seen it shift from 2 to 4 years we had it a lot of workers coming to this particular county for tobacco. And a couple years later, they weren't coming to that county, they were coming to the county next to it. So there'd be a whole shift in kind of the pattern of where the agriculture was happening for different things. And so we had to pay attention to that and see what was going on. I need to look in the chat box and see if there's any questions before I don't see any. Okay, so one way that, that you can have kind of see what's going on with recruiters is something we call our recruiter strength assessment. So Melissa just dropped it in the chat box for everybody. And I'm going to go ahead and open it up to share what this looks like. So this is on our website. It was created again by our technical support team. So, and the purpose of this was recruiters don't know what they don't know. So maybe I was given the job of recruitment. I wasn't really trained, which was my situation when I started. And I'm not really sure exactly what I'm supposed to do. So this is a way that you can kind of look in and determine what how comfortable people are with different things. I noticed somebody raised their hand. If you want to put your question in the chat box, and we'll answer it that way. So this first thing asks you kind of what percentage, and some people may get locked up in the percentage over here. The main thing is you're doing a self-assessment to say, how long has it been since I went to farms and agribusiness? How long since I visited farm worker housing? How long has it been since I just canvassed housing in general or enrolled families? So they kind of do a self-assessment on these different areas. And then they determine how comfortable they are in these different areas. So sometimes as coordinators, we can be not really understand what recruiters have to do. And we can say, hey, go make sure you go talk to the farms. And then the recruiter is like, I'm not really sure how to talk to the HR personnel, or what exactly am I supposed to say to the farm owners? And then another recruiter will be super comfortable and be able to do that. So this, you're able to gauge how comfortable am I speaking to the farm agribusiness owner? How about when all the workers are standing there at a lunch break and I got to figure out how to talk to all of them? It's just me and I have a group of 35 workers. How can I talk to them really quickly so they'll want to talk to me afterwards? Am I comfortable speaking with workers by themselves? Then it looks at housing. Am I okay with going to a trailer park? Am I okay at an apartment or H2A? Does that make me nervous? You're kind of just doing a self-assessment. How good am I in working with others in the community school? How am I comfortable explaining this to an organization and trying to figure out how to develop partnerships? So the recruiters pick and they get an average score of this. The other thing is they look at planning. How good are we, at doing the required paperwork? How good am I at really making a plan for the week? How good am I at organizing resources and materials? So once they go through all of this, it's a chance to really kind of self-reflect and see where they think their strengths are and see where they think they need to grow. Now, if done right, in my opinion, this is something that they would be willing to share with their supervisor, because they're able to say, the supervisor is able to set this up of, I want you to take this to see where you need more support and where we can kind of identify areas that are hard for you and figure out how we can make that become something that's a little bit easier. So that's why we have that. So this gives you an idea when you're kind of figuring out the plan. If you've got two recruiters that are absolutely uncomfortable in a certain area, it doesn't matter what you say or, hey, you got to really do this. You're going to have to provide that extra, training and knowledge, or maybe partner with someone that is their strength so that they can see how that's done and be able to overcome that fear. So this is part of the assessment of what's going on in your state. And so they can do that self-check. They can see how that balanced recruitment's going. If limited staff are available to provide support, one of the things we do for our member states is we do provide support for those areas where they're feeling maybe they're really uncomfortable with housing and they're not sure how to do it. We can provide support and ideas and training on how to do that. So once you're able to see that you kind of can share those weaknesses, that, if recruiters are willing to share those, and then more support and more capacity can be built. So this is part of the assessment that you're looking at. And we did this with a particular state not too long ago, where they felt like the recruiters were doing a really good job, but they weren't seeing an increase in numbers and wishing that maybe they could support them in a different way, knowing that you don't always see an increase in numbers. But their supervisor was trying to be proactive to figure out how he could really help his staff. And so they took this assessment, and surprisingly, many of them had worked together for years and they didn't realize where each other was uncomfortable. And then they were able to see that several recruiters had a strength where another one was really uncomfortable, and he just paired them. And so they were able to start working together. And it was in a way that, they could say, hey, I really need support with this, rather than, not wanting to say that they're uncomfortable going to farms or doing different things. It says, where do you find the assessment to print out? Well, if you can click on the link that Melissa put there, and you can just print it from that same place. Okay. So another thing is you want to really look at your quality control. If you're getting your COEs in and they're coming in and there's a bunch of mistakes, or maybe you do re-interviews and it looks like your error rate's really high, you've got to look at when your state IDR plan of what you need to fix with that, because that may be professional development. We had a state recently that everyone took the assessment, the national assessment, and they scored really low. And so they had some turnover with staff. And so they said, we've really got to improve this. We've got to figure out what people don't know, because we think we've had a lot of new people on board without adequate training. So this is part of what you have to do. Do we feel like you're where you need? Do you have enough interaction with your recruiters to know what they need? So you can that's part of what you want to make sure that you assess. So as you're reviewing, you're trying to make sure you know where everything's happening. You're looking at what's happening with schools. So maybe you get a whole bunch of surveys from schools, but they're not being responded, or the families are not being contacted for 4-6 months. And so this whole process that you're doing with the schools is totally ineffective because the families have already moved on, or it's no longer relevant. So this is part of what you're doing to say, all right, how is this working in each one of these areas? Then another thing that we really believe in is these weekly logs or daily logs. It kind of shocks me in some places that they don't require anything from recruiters. Recruiters can say, well, I recruited this week. Well, as a supervisor of recruiters and as a recruiter myself in the past, there's a lot of efforts that need to go to make sure you're using your time well. And so there's a lot of strategy. Maybe you look at the weather and you see it's a rainy day and you're going to do something totally different than if the weather was good, because people in your area work outside and their jobs are based off the weather. If it's a nice day, they've got work in the fields, and if they don't, they're going to be home. So you have to know how to change those things. And so you should be able to have recruiters, and if you are a recruiter, you're keeping track of where you went and what they said and who were your contacts, so that later on it's a lot easier to remember those things. Maybe you keep track of all the follow-up that you need to do, and each week work on those. So we have a tool that we call that's called Connect Team that anyone can use, and I think it's free up to a certain amount of accounts, but we provide through IDRC to our member states that they can create reports that their recruiters can fill out on the app while they're out in the field, and hopefully it'll give them information. But the point of this is the information you're gathering should help guide your work in the future. In Migrant Ed, we have a lot of turnover. So if you've got a really good recruiter and they wind up leaving, you've lost all their knowledge unless you've been able to have some reports and some information. When I worked in Tennessee, we had a man that was wonderful. If you guys listen to the English in Minutes books, it's his voice that is on those recordings. But he was horrible at reports. And so one of the things that we did each year was we would have someone ride along at the end of the season, and he would talk about every single place that he went, and we would mark it all down and put it on the map, and everybody else did their job. They would always send in the reports, but he hated it. And so he was super good recruiter. He was always finding families, but he really struggled with the report. And so as a supervisor, that was something that I tried to do to make sure we still got information from him. And we're able to really make sure that, I mean, he was canvassing his community. We just didn't have all that was in his mind for us. And so let's see, making sure to see if there's any questions.
No, I was just sending them the recruiter straight assessment.
Okay. The other thing we have that all states can use is the referral tool. So this tool was created multiple years ago by the technical support team with the idea that sometimes we're out in the community, and let's say we're working with migrant health, or let's just migrant Head Start, for example. And they have agreed to work with us, but they may want to share information about possible families that would be eligible if they get permission from the families. The referral tool is a way that they can go in. I'm going to go ahead and click on this, see if I can open it up and share. So it's on the website. And so when they first get there, can click on here and it'll take them to the referral system. You could just share this link too. And when they get there, it's just a very short system that they go in and they answer a few questions. It's available in multiple languages. If you click on training tools, we have brochures, for example, like an agribusiness and a farm, one that can be given out that if a farmer has a possible workers that might be interested, but he says, oh, I might have a couple guys, he can put the information there, and there's a QR code where you can find the referral tool. We have multiple of these. We have a school district brochure that just kind of is in general if they want to use a referral tool. But the way it works is basically they answer a few questions, and I'll just share it real quick. I'm just going to do this real fast. They can put the information, and I'm just going to put a bunch of bogus information just so that they know it's not a real referral. Let's say we put the state, and then it'll put all the cities in the state once I do that. Let's see. So the city, let's see, it's Alexander City, let's see, and then it'll put the county for us. And I'm just going to put the phone. So then it asks, is there anyone in the household under the age of 22? We say, if I say no, it'll say, well, then you really don't need to put the referral in. If I say yes, then I go on to next. Then it'll say, has anyone in the household moved or traveled for work in the last 36 months or 3 years? We say yes. If yes, has anyone been employed in agriculture or fishing? Yes, and then they'll pick whatever it was. And then we can press next, and then you can just put your information. This is a test, or whatever it was that you wanted to put in there. And you press next, and that information will be submitted. Now, the interesting thing is, then you can set up the account so recruiters can be assigned to certain counties, and as soon as that referral goes in, they'll get a notification that they have a new referral. And so anyone can have access to this if their state agrees to it. So they just have to reach out and we can set up the accounts. It has to be based off organization of the state of who should have the referrals for their state. Let me see if we have any questions. Hello, is any recruiter in the panel that is from Indiana would like to see if they could provide me the information, please. I'm not sure what you mean by that, but you can go ahead and put more information in the chat box. So you want to review how it is working with the schools. You want to see what surveys you're following along. You want to see what recruiter logs you have, what kind of relationships you have with your local districts. You want to determine how many surveys you have. We always suggest that if you have surveys, you respond back. So if you're wondering what surveys are, that could be, a survey that are given to new students. Some districts give it to every single student. I really think that you can cut down a lot of trees across the country that are not needed. The main thing is you're trying to figure out any new student to the district, have they moved in the last 3 years, and those can fill out the surveys. Those surveys can then be given to Migrant Ed, and they can follow up any of them that have yeses on those to see if they're eligible. So you can try to make sure you have an assigned liaison or that you have somebody that you're working with each district. One of the things you're checking for your state plan is, are you using, are you canvassing ag? And so those of you that are not aware, IDRC has an ag portal for every single state. And let me share what that looks like. I feel like sometimes we're like a broken record and are sharing a lot of the same things. This ag portal has every listing that we could possibly find of the agriculture in your state. And so one of the things when you're making your IDR plan, you want to be able to look at those, really look at your resources that already exist out there and figure out if your recruiters are able to visit those, or if I'm a local recruiter, I'm able to look at those places and see how many of them I've actually visited. So part of my plan should be assessing the information that's already available and being able to look, hey, am I working with contractors? Am I visiting those different transitional housing that's in my community? Do I know where the farms are? Have I been to those H2A farms or regular farms? So that's part of the assessment that you're doing, is checking out kind of what you're doing with, with the portal right there and what you have. So let's see. Okay. Moving on. So this is we're still assessing. We're still looking at all of these things. Then you're looking at your partnerships. So you want to create a list of who does your MEP program work with? Do you have any? I feel like a lot of times nationally, we don't have a lot of partners. We may work with Migrant Head Start. We may work with Migrant Health, but sometimes we don't go much deeper. We might work with Adult Ed. We might work with the seasonal jobs program. There is a cool tool called findhelp.org that you can go ahead. I know I've shared this a bunch of times too. Sometimes we use it as a way to find resources for families. But another thing you can do is to understand what agencies are doing what in your community. So if I want to know who provides housing help or who provides some sort of help with health, I can go in here and check out, all the dental resources or all the mental health things. And as I click on these, I can go in and see the kind of programs and who does it. So there's Family Counseling Center of Middle Tennessee. Maybe I want to work with them as a partner. Maybe it could be something that I want, to have access to. I can go in and learn these different types of things that are in the community and see who might be a good partner, who it would be mutually beneficial for us to work with. So you can use that tool. For housing, I know I mentioned that. We suggest that you really kind of keep a list of all the housing you've had in the past, all those locations. You make sure that those visits are being made. We have the list of trailer parks that's on the ag portal. You're just kind of keeping track of where those places are, and you try to make sure that they're visited whatever would be the appropriate amount of time. Maybe it was housing last season and people have come and gone, so you want to check that same housing the following season. Sometimes it's people are really there year round and they just come and go randomly. So you need to periodically check when would make sense for you.
Jessica,
Yes.
do you want to address Angelita's question?
How often do you update that information? We have found that it's not as accurate as we would like. So that's exactly what, so we just give you a beginning list, but it is the state's responsibility to take those lists and make it their own. So it's definitely not our responsibility to always be updating it for you. We put everything out there. It is the state's responsibility to take those lists, be able to pull down, the recruiter's responsibility to pull down their area. It's just to give you a base to get started. As you're out in the community, you should find way more than what we have. We can only find what's online. So if a business closes or that, so sometimes we'll have states say, well, I'm not sure. Why did you include this? We do a big, wide, swing wide to be able to give you as much information. But for your area, it's your responsibility to pull those down, make it your own, add to it, do whatever you can to find to have a really comprehensive list of the places that you need to go. So several years ago, most states didn't have anything. And so now if you find that something's outdated, make a note of that and then make sure on your list that you've got that. So let's see. Okay, so you can use those lists. You can use your current data to determine what reports you need to run. So maybe you're running an old housing list. Maybe you're running those numbers on what's happening. Maybe you're running a list of current families or families that you had the previous year and seeing if you have a bunch of movement back and forth from the same families, seeing who you're missing. You want to make sure that you're being very thorough with your data to understand what's going on. Now, this is where you have all of these little pieces. Those of you that did were at the Recruiter Invitational 2 years ago, what we had them literally do was take sticky notes and a big poster board, and they started writing down all the different things that needed to happen in different times. So they had their CSPR data that needed to be gathered. They had school visits that need to be done. They had in the field visits with recruiters. It didn't matter what it was that they had. They would write everything that needed to be done. And then they had everything by month. So you'd have January, February, March. You'd have this poster board with these different months. And then they would put those sticky notes in the different areas. And so what you're trying to do is you've done an assessment of kind of all these different areas. Now you're trying to figure out what needs to happen at different times and when is the correct time for these things to happen. Let me check the chat box to see. It says, can I have a copy of the weekly form you mentioned to list work? If you want to email me, I can send you some samples of kind of a weekly report of what that would look like. Let's see. Okay. So it says here, identify the areas of need, develop a plan on how to increase efforts and who's responsible for that, be detailed, create measurable goals and activities that are doable with the current program setup. So you're putting it together. You want to train your staff on those measurable goals. You want to review current practices of what goals have in the past have been met and review how goals are tracked and measured in your current protocols. So goals are going to look different for different people. Maybe you have this huge farm list that you're not sure what's updated, what's not. And so your goal is to continue to work in different sections of your area. Like if I was a recruiter and I have a county, I'm not going to run all over the county all over. I'm going to do a section at a time. I'm going to cover everything in that area. So maybe my goal is to make sure that I'm able to canvas and be able to figure out who I need to consistently visit and when. So whatever it is your goal, you want to make sure that it's measurable. It's something that you can be able to track and see, and you can review it with current practices and things you've done in the past that have been successful. So you want to create those goals. Maybe you're looking at your other things that are not related to IDR, but it's more related to the how they do it on the national assessment of understanding. It's related to quality control, whatever it is. Maybe it's on the recruiter strength assessment and you're really uncomfortable talking to human resource. So you need training on how to do that. So part of the goals could be to be able to develop a plan of how to work with them better and be able to actually build some relationships with a local plant or a local place. So you want to break down the goals by district, by region, and state. If you're a state person, if you're a local recruiter, you're really just making your goals on how you're making sure that balanced recruitment is actually happening in your neck of the woods. So when you put it all together, you can review the ag crops. So this is another thing that's interesting. We've done a lot of work on what we call our ag visualization tool. I know many of you know about this, but if you don't, I'm always kind of surprised that there's plenty of people that have never seen this. So I want to make sure that people see this and they know what it is. So I'm just going to pick a state. Let's say we look at the state of Louisiana. What this does, and I won't go through tons of it today because we do have a training exactly on what it is, and I'll share with you where you can find that. This is a guide to understand what's happening in each one of your areas. So we kind of share information by county on crops and different activities. And so there are 14 different pages that let you see the farm worker numbers. It lets you see what types of operations are there that hire farm workers. Farm worker numbers are just the people that were on the ag census that farmers said, we hired this number of workers. You can see what types of livestock are in the area. And I'm just going to do this kind of fast just because I could do a full training on this. You can see the number of vegetables. And the cool thing is I can change the counties here and the information will change. Now, Louisiana may not be a big vegetable acres. I probably should pick a different state. Let me see. Let me find, let's look at Georgia. The state of Georgia has lots and lots of crops. So you can go through and look and understand what's happening in, like I said, the livestock. You can also look at what's happening in poultry. And so if as you change this, you'll see the information will change based off the county. You can see the number of vegetable acres that are harvested in the particular area. I'm trying to see if it's, let's see, I think it's Toombs County is one of the big ones. Let's see. Yeah, so like they have 3,369 acres of onions in this particular area. Then they have a whole bunch of different information. So this basically is another tool that you can take a look at and kind of see what's happening in different areas. And in the back of this is a crop timeline that lets you see what's happening in different crops. And so we suggest that you use these tools, that you can really look at the different types of crops that are happening in different areas. And when you're making that plan, you're keeping that in mind to say, when is onions, what are the processes with onions? You know, they're going to plant, they're going to harvest, they're going to, at some point, we're going to weed. What is it that's going to happen and when is this? And that way I make sure I have my recruiters canvassing those areas that has the 3,000 acres of onions. And so you're looking at all your different crops that you have and how that plays into part. You're looking at your list to figure out where your H2A workers are. You're looking at all of these things together. So if you've never seen this tool, I would suggest you go to our homepage, and then you go right here to the recruiter resources page. Sorry, I probably did that too fast. If you click on recruiter resources, we have a YouTube page that explains how to use those insights, how to use your crop timeline, how to use your ag portal, how to use your farm worker numbers, and how to put it all together. And so this is part of what is in that strategic planning. So if you click on this, it'll play all those videos, and they're short. This first one's the longest one. It's about 17 minutes. It shows you every single page and how to use it. And then the other ones are like 3 to 5 minutes for the additional things. Let me see if there's anything else. Okay. So you go back to the slides. So this is to help you kind of prioritize. So I live, for example, in the nursery capital of the world, and nursery is not really going on in the summer. They, where I live, they dig a lot of trees, and so they can't dig the trees until the freeze, and so the sap stops running in the tree, and so the tree goes a little bit dormant. And so the work here depends on how cold it gets, and as soon as it gets cold, but it can't freeze too much because then the ground is frozen, it's hard to dig. So I would always have to pay attention to when that final frost was, when the leaves start coming off the tree, and then you start seeing people dig the trees all over. They dig them and they ball up the roots. So I knew that we needed to make sure that we were having some time in October, November, December, and January was when we were going to do the most work in nursery. And so if that was my local area, I've got to put that on my timeline to figure out that this is what's happening. But in another part of our state, we might have tobacco, which is going to happen more in the summer, and the harvesting is going to start early fall. And so you have to know those different crops. But if you back to those sticky notes and putting everything by month, you're going to put it based, you know, all of those different crops and the different times that people are going to come and go. You're going to want to put that on there. One of our challenges is we did summer programs in areas of tomato harvest. And so we knew that the harvest, there were going to be some planters that were going to come, but the majority of our workers would come July 4th weekend. Our summer school started the following week. So on our timelines of, you know, how we're going to do our state plan, we know that those last couple of weeks of June and those first couple of weeks of July, we are all out recruiting in those areas where there's a lot of tomato workers that when they first come in, we're in the right place. So we had to strategically know of those things. So whatever your crops are, you want to know when that movement is coming in and out and how you can best use your time to be able to find them. So you want to make sure that you know all of those things. Recruiters know that migrant staff know what are their crops, when are those things happening. We also have a tool. Let me just share. Let me see if I can go to the website. That's just, we're working on updating these because we had some, we're adding even more. Let's say that the state of Alabama is just wondering different types of crop times of when things are happening. And so let me see if I can open this up. So we have just an example of all the different crops that are in the area and then the times that it'll be happening. And so if they have asparagus, for example, this is Alabama, we've got north and south. So some states are long enough that they may have different weather on one part of the state compared to the other. So they can see that asparagus in the north, the harvesting is going to start April all the way through August. And the planting in the north is going to be February through April. So you can kind of see the difference of the different crops. So this is to help you say, oh, well, I have beets in my area. Well, what would be happening? Harvesting would be this time, thinning would be this. So you can look, like it says here, blueberries, they can be different in different parts of the state, but there's a big bulk that's going to happen May through August. So when I'm making this timeline, I'm looking at all those crops and the information that you can kind of see. So let's see, I know I got to go back to my slides. So this is all part of what you're trying to put it all together. And so you can check out those state crop line timelines and kind of put that in. Another thing is you're trying to figure out areas where you might need to go to, and you want to review the possible number of farm workers in your area. And so I know we've shared this a bunch of times, but I feel like we might need to be, and I need to update this one. Let me share where you can find this. So sorry, I'm sharing everything but that. Let me go over here. So these can be found over here under Recruiter Resources, State Farm Worker Net Maps numbers. So we did these so that you can kind of see what the Ag Census said about the different types of number of farm workers in different areas. So this is Arizona's. I did Arizona's because they don't have a huge number of counties. And so you can see the way that we did this was everything in black is the 2017 numbers from the 2017 census. And everything in green or red is the new census. It's red if the numbers went down, green if the numbers went up. So when I'm making my state IDR plan, let's say that I am the state of Pennsylvania. And I'm trying to figure out, let's see if I can make it bigger. Trying to figure out where, kind of looking at where our programs are. And I want to check and make sure that I can kind of see if everything's aligning. And so maybe, and I'm just making this up, maybe we haven't worked very much in this part of the state. And we're going to make a plan of where would be the best place for us to do an effort where we organize different recruiters. You can look at this and see the difference and see what's happening and kind of look at that total numbers or total probability of where you can find farm workers. So this exists for every state. Some of the states, so if they were not a member state, we don't have the comparison as much from state to state. So this is a non-member state, whereas we may look at the state of Kentucky, for example, and you can see that we have the numbers of what it used to be. It's just we had the data from before because we did the 2017 census for them also. So I can see here by my colors that as far as orange, this little county in here, Fayette here, has the biggest chance of finding workers. But look at the huge difference of farm workers between 2017 to 2022. So I can see that there's been a decrease. But these areas that are green, I want to make sure and see what's going on where there's an increase too. So you want to be able to use this data in your state plan to figure out, how to best understand it. So going back, we kind of talk about putting it all together. You're going to determine whether you also want to work with different ag associations. One of the things that I think that is one of the easiest ways for migrant ed programs to get into ag associations is your local farm bureau. We talk about extension a lot, but the Farm Bureau has insurance programs for farmers. They also do a lot of advocacy, a lot of legislation, kind of pushing work for farmers. And so these guys usually they know farmers from across the state and farmers trust them. And so we, on a national level, we have some partners with the National Farm Bureau, but we've been trying to get it go all the way down to local states. So if a recruiter's in a particular area and they have a newsletter from their Farm Bureau that mentions migrant ed, it makes it a lot easier to say, look, your association knows about us. This is what we do. So you've got to make plans in your IDNR plan of who you're going to partner with, how you're going to do that, and then put that as part of the timeline of who's going to do that. So as for a state that does not have a comparison, is the data from the most recent census. Yeah, everyone has, every single state has the most recent farm worker numbers. So on there. So even if you weren't a member, we just don't have the 2017 numbers for you also. So now let's start talking about putting this all together. I know I've mentioned a lot of different things that should have. What you want to do is do index cards or sticky notes and have some sort of paper that has, every single month, January, February, and you're going to put down the different things that need to be happening and put those where they need to happen. So maybe you're doing re-verifications in September to see which one of your families are still around as the new year starts. You're going to put that in September, but I might put to prepare for that in August. So I'm going to put all of these things, my little sticky notes of every single thing that needs to happen in my different times of my different months. And so it should have things like re-verification. It should have things like when you sign up students for summer programs. It should have when you visit farms. It should have when you're working with the school districts, maybe for enrollment of students. When you're working with specifically with community locations or community partners. So one of the things you can do is put all these out on be able to see all these different little index cards or sticky notes, and you look at where your holes are. So maybe in October, I'm not super busy. So this is when I need to reach out to farms because it's not their busy season and they might talk to me and I can make plans before the next season starts. But you're going to want to put it all out so that you can kind of see. So you're making a monthly calendar when these things should happen. You're also looking at what types of activities should be happening during slow months. For example, calling families to see if they know that if anyone's moved or getting referrals. You want to determine also when and what professional development should be offered. And you want to look when recruiters should be attending school meetings, when they should be introducing the program, when IDR planning should be done. I noticed somebody raised their hand. Put your question in the chat box if you can. How your partnership development with identified agencies will happen. So, and for example, with the ag associations, when do they have their annual meetings? Does the Cotton Association in your state meet in February? And you could go and talk to farmers there where they're already comfortable and be able to make partnerships that way. You're going to be thinking about all of those things and putting it down specifically on your plan. So it should figure out what you should be doing each month by farms, fisheries, and agribusiness, what you should be doing each month with different partnerships, and what activities and crops are happening each month. How can you get referrals and leads from the community, and what efforts are you doing? The plan should be mapped out by month and include the activities that happen in each month. So differentiate those activities by busy versus slow. So my example of the tomato harvest recruitment, that was a very busy season. And so we knew that we had to have plenty of extra staff on at that time. And we also need to determine what were coordinators doing, what were recruiters. So coordinators were getting those COEs in as fast as they possibly could, getting in this, doing their quality control checks, getting them into the system. And then we were letting the school district know, hey, this one's ready. And then they were doing the bus route of where the kids were going to pick up. So in that time, there was multiple things that were happening, multiple coordination, those kind of things you're looking on a local, a regional, or a state. So the state may not, in their plan, they may not need to have my bus route, stuff that all needs to. But if I'm a local program on our plan, I'm going to have all those extra details so that I know how our programs can all work together and how my recruitment can support those other things. So you also want to make sure in your yearly balance plan that you've got those measurable goals. Maybe you want to make sure that you can show by the end that more recruiters are comfortable in all areas of recruitment. Maybe you're trying to make sure that you get those reports and you're helping really look at those action plans and make sure the action plans that their recruiters are sharing for the next week align with the things that were supposed to happen during that month. Maybe it's part of the training that you have a new recruiter and you're like, hey, here's the kind of things that you should be doing the next few months. Here's our plan. Here's the activities that we're doing. So here's an example of a spreadsheet that's, very simple, that says, all right, January, what are the activities that need to be conducted? What kind of surveys are we getting at that time? Are there any specific activities need to happen with the school? What are we going to do housing wise? Is there certain parts of the state where more people are going to be, the season? I'm not going to canvass housing in my tomato area in January if everybody's gone. So when can I, when is housing most crucial to do? Key crop activities. So what's happening in January? What is all the listing of those key things that I need to have in mind? What agriculture organizations or businesses should I contact this time? Do I want to be contacting them in their busy season? Sometimes you have to, or can I do some work beforehand to figure out who I can partner with? What are the MEP activities that need to be conducted? Those are things like, your re-verifications, or maybe you have a PAC meeting at the time, or maybe you're doing something for your needs assessment or gathering information. What are any of those kind of things that need to be happening related to the regulations and the laws and all those kind of things? What are their professional development activities? Maybe you have your training for your recruiters in the slow time instead of the busy time. Whatever that looks like, you're going to put all of those things in January. Community partnership development activities, you're going to put every single thing for January, and then you're going to do the same thing to check out what needs to happen in February and March and April, all the way through. So you literally could have your state plan could be in something as simple as a spreadsheet that shows the different kind of things with a narrative that explains kind of how this all works together. So it can be as complicated as you want or as simple as you want, but the goal is that your staff or you yourself, if you're the recruiter, know the kind of things that need to be happening and that you are using your time, which mostly is usually limited, and most of us don't have enough funding. So we need to be really strategic at how we're using our time and the efforts and activities that we're doing to really kind of reach out to that. So that activity that we did, like at the Recruiter Invitational a couple of years ago, 2 years ago, where we just got, big poster board, or those little sticky ones, big, huge sticky things you can put on the wall. And we literally had people just, what's January, what's March? They could put it all out. It makes sense. And you can kind of see, but all of these different areas need to be in your plan. And like I said, you cannot forget to really assess what your current situation is in order to do that strategic planning. So then you want to really put into action. It's one thing to have a plan. It's another thing for this to work. So I had an experience with the state where they wanted me to interview all of these different recruiters because something was not working. And so when I interviewed all the different recruiters to see how it was going, they all identified a certain thing that they felt was really holding them back. And so I wrote a report and turned it back in, and that thing was never addressed. That situation that they all said, hey, this is the reason why when we sent it back to the state, they never changed it. And so a year later, the recruiters were still struggling with the same thing. They were still, because it's one thing to make a plan, it's another thing to look and identify and find your challenge areas and really do things to change it and make sure. So examples of how to put it in action, you're really discussing with recruiters how they can make those daily, weekly, and monthly plans related to your yearly plan. You can help them with really make those plans in the beginning. You can conduct regular check-in meetings with staff. You make sure that you have those measurable goals and attainable goals. And so I feel like there's a lot of different things that can go into making a good plan. But the main thing is you're looking at all these essential things that need to be happening and figuring out within the time that you have, how can you best do that? So if you're a part-time recruiter, you're looking at how can you get the most, when we went back to, we talked about that, the page where, I don't even know how far back it is, where we were looking at the numbers. And so maybe I have limited time and I have 16 counties. I'm going to go to the places where I'm going to possibly find more families first to make sure that we're continuing to find, and I'm not spending my time in the one area that doesn't have hardly anybody and not finding anybody and just kind of spinning my wheels. So you want to be strategic. You want to make sure that you're looking at all these different elements. And as you do that, you'll be able to really see how effective this can be and be able to, like the question earlier, what happens if we find if, the list is outdated? That's the kind of thing that you want in your plan, that you update your lists and that you, we've told our member states and we'll tell any state, if on their state leadership, they wind up getting their lists all really organized and they want that list to be up there, we'll do that. But we just don't want people like, well, we haven't really checked this and we're not sure. You should be thoroughly canvassing and knowing what's happening in your particular state. So do you have a sample plan so we can see the full format and how it shall look together? We do not have a sample one because it's very, very different for each state. And we also didn't want to provide one example and then states are like, oh, this is how we're supposed to do it. So this is an example of we're saying what might be a template that you would put it in. But we really think that it's so unique per state. If I'm the state of Alaska, it's going to look totally different from Florida. So, but it's your state essential meetings, basically those essential things that need to be happening in your state, and then you put it into some format that works for you to know what that should look like. So let me see. Okay, so that, want to look at questions. So any questions that anyone has, if you want to put them in the chat box and we'll address those. And I may stop recording here real quick.